Joining me now here in the studio is RT correspondent Saskia Taylor. So Saskia, still very early on in this investigation. We're just getting very scant details at the moment. Is there anything that you are hearing to update us?
Well, it did take, obviously, a while to understand the who, the what, the where. Obviously, no one wanted to make any grand statements without official confirmation. But we do now have that, and it has been stated that one of Russia's top military officials, that's Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, of course, is a face that many would recognise because he headed up for around 7-8 years the country's radiological, chemical and biological defence forces. So he was killed in the early hours of Tuesday morning. And we often saw him speaking about biological weapons laboratories on Ukrainian territory. He was always talking about how this was under not just the funding, but also the patronage of the West, specifically Washington, which, of course, you and I, Rachel, know this is something that Victoria Nuland herself admitted to at a Senate committee hearing. Only recently, the last couple of months, if we want to talk about highlights from some of his speeches, he added that chemical elements were actually being smuggled through NATO territory. He highlighted Romania, mentioned Moldova, and had been warning that Kiev was planning a false flag operation. So from his chair, he really was, I think, a voice that was trying to expose some of the truly dirty and, of course, the most kind of base and dangerous types of warfare. Another individual who was killed was Kirillov's assistant. And just very quickly to recap what Anastasia was there saying, it took place early on Tuesday morning near a residential block on really a major thoroughfare in Moscow. He's a Moscow native in the southeast of the capital. And we know that it was a blast triggered by a remotely controlled improvised explosive device, an IED, which had been apparently attached to an electric scooter. Apparently that scooter has now been taken off-site for analysis. And it was near the block's entrance. The two were exiting. Now there's even a rumour that potentially the person who pressed the blast button might have been hiding, waiting and watching for those two to exit. But the power of the explosion, it's interesting, some eyewitnesses there talking about how windows, even on the third floor, had actually blasted out.
Yeah, that was my big question. This was obviously a very targeted assassination, and that bomb allegedly attached to a scooter. I mean, how could something like this actually happen? And as you said, a major thoroughfare in Moscow.
Well, I mean, obviously, we know, I mean, look, relevant authorities are at the scene. We know that investigators are there. There are sappers, apparently, who are also cleaning out the territory. What we can talk about, though, and I think that's an answer to your question, is obviously likely hypotheticals, so we say. How did we get to where we are? I mean, look, over the last 2 and a bit years since the war started, we've seen a string of terror attacks. Let's call them what they are, right? I mean, similar in whom they target, though this, I would say, is on an unprecedented level. This would mark the most high-level official to die in a terrorist attack, and similar in method. I mean, we've been reporting, right, over the last couple of months and years, governing faces in Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson provinces, regions that have been targeted, often successfully, as always, almost without exception, in car bombs. Only 2 months ago, Ukraine killed what they called a, quote, collaborator and traitor who was head of security at the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. A week ago, a former prison chief was murdered in a car bomb in Donetsk, and the list goes on. And I mean, we're not going to talk even about journalists, right, who have been targeted both in the war zone and on Russian territory. Very sensational footage, I'm sure you'll remember, from that cafe in St. Petersburg last spring, where the Russian, well, they called him a blogger, he was a journalist, Vladlen Tatarsky, was blown up. And of course, the murder, I think, one that really shook a lot of people, and understand the depravity of the people who were in charge of what was going on. The murder of 30-year-old Daria Dugina, the daughter of Russia's probably most famous philosopher. So these are assassinations, right? And some of which Kiev takes responsibility for, others which it simply celebrates without confirmation, though even the US admitted, for example, that they thought that Ukraine killed Daria.
All right. Saskia Taylor, thank you.